Ever since Antonio Brown took over the Albany Empire, he's gone completely off the deep end. He's locked players out of hotels, neglected to pay salaries, and even made physical threats. Which begs the question, why didn't anybody stop him? Hi, I'm Tyler Webb, and today we'll be taking a deeper dive into the curious case of Antonio Brown.
Against NFL star Antonio Brown.
Antonio Brown video from yesterday.
It's Antonio Brown.
But first things first, let's explain how we got here. After all, it wasn't long ago that Antonio Brown was catching passes from Tom Brady. For a brief minute, it even seemed like AB was getting his life back on track. He helped the Buccaneers win Super Bowl 55, and more importantly, he stayed out of the drama. That being said, it was only a matter of time before Antonio Brown started trouble again. Because who can forget his temper tantrum against the Jets in 2022? As the story goes, the Buccaneers were trailing the Jets in the second half. Then, all of a sudden, Bruce Arians asks Antonio Brown to re-enter the game, and complete chaos ensued. Rather than re-entering the game, AB opted to stay on the sideline. He wasn't 100% and didn't want to risk further injury. However, Bruce Arians wasn't having any of it. He told Brown to enter the game or leave the team. And if you know anything about Antonio Brown, he doesn't respond well to confrontation. So instead of listening to Arians, AB ripped off his jersey and exited the stadium. Unsurprisingly, this sent shockwaves around the league. It's one thing to quit, but it's another to make a big scene of it. However, soon, this would become the least of Antonio Brown's concerns. Because whether he realized it or not, his biggest problems were still ahead. And now that his NFL days were over, he needed to find a new source of income. He purchased a minority stake in an Arena League football team. But this wasn't just any football team. This was where his father had once played, the Albany Empire. Better yet, AB's dad, Eddie Brown, is widely considered to be one of the greatest players in Arena Football League history. Throughout his career, Eddie accumulated 950 receptions for 12,736 yards and 303 receiving touchdowns. In other words, this was supposed to be the perfect father-son bonding experience. Eddie gets to relive his glory days, and Antonio gets to relive his childhood and extend his football career. AB recalls, "I remember being here as a kid watching my dad play in this building. All the little kids with face paint cheering. So this is great for me to be here with my kids and my dad and give back to this community." However, Antonio Brown couldn't be further from the truth. Instead of helping the community, the move inevitably hurt them more than they could have ever known. The Albany Empire was already a thriving franchise, coming off their third straight championship. So the last thing they needed was drama. So you can't help but think, why did nobody stop AB from purchasing the Empire? But then again, Antonio and Eddie didn't seem to care about other people's opinion. And when push came to shove, they weren't just satisfied with a minority stake. They wanted to take over the entire team. As a result, AB made primary owner Mike Quarta an offer he couldn't refuse. But according to Albany's former head coach Damon Ware, it was essentially Antonio Brown, quote, just throwing money at Quarta. But what AB didn't realize was how expensive running a professional team can be, because purchasing the team is just the beginning. It's more than just a one-time cash infusion. You have to pay the players, pay the coaching staff, and invest in stadium maintenance, among other things. And spoiler alert, Antonio Brown didn't do a good job keeping up with his payments. Instead, he defaulted to the same old AB, the version that only cares about himself. And it's reported that AB stopped paying the players and staff in April. Around the same time, he and his dad assumed full ownership of the team. This left team captains with no choice but to contact team officials for help. Players even contemplating sitting out against the Carolina Cobras on April 29th. Or at least they were contemplating sitting out until they were shown what appeared to be a payment confirmation. However, this move ended up just being a decoy. The game came and went, and the players remained unpaid. So once again, Antonio Brown got his way, and nobody did anything about it. Although AB wasn't content just getting his way. He was upset that players ratted him out to team officials. Consequently, Antonio Brown locked players and coaches out of their hotel rooms following their game. This sent players into a complete frenzy, as they had to beg the cleaning staff to let them back in to retrieve their belongings. For reference, this situation reminds me of a popular show called Outer Banks. For those unfamiliar with the show, it's about a group of kids who embark on a mission to find gold, and in the process, they become so attached to the gold that they're willing to do almost anything to get their hands on it. This is essentially who Antonio Brown is becoming. He's willing to do almost anything to put himself first and get his way, even if it isn't morally right. But the drama doesn't stop there, because in just 3 months since taking over the team in March, both their head coach and quarterback quit. Yet, this didn't come as much of a surprise, because not only was their head coach Damon Ware not getting paid, but he was also getting threatened. According to Ware, his conversations with Brown over miscompensation led to AB sending violent physical threats over text. It became all about him, not the football team, Ware says. "We built a wonderful organization over 3 years. He came in and killed it." But at this point, people expected nothing less of Antonio Brown. This was, after all, pretty normal based on his history. And as if not paying the team wasn't already bad enough, Antonio Brown continued his selfish ways. Most recently, AB announced he would play during Albany's home game on May 27th. He even went as far as to advertise it on the front page of the Albany Empire's website. But Come game time, Brown was nowhere to be found. Instead, he placed himself on the inactive list. Now, normally this wouldn't be a big deal. Players decide to hold out or not play in games all the time. However, this situation was much different. Fans from across the country traveled to come see AB play. So much so, in fact, that Albany sold over twice the amount of tickets as normal. Which begs the question, was this just an advertising ploy or was Antonio Brown actually hurt? Well, according to Brown, he wanted to get on the field the right way and set a good example for the rest of the team. That being said, he did promise reporters they'd see him on the field sometime this season. But then again, that explanation doesn't warrant his decision to advertise himself on the team's website. Because contrary to what he said, it wasn't setting a good example. It was narcissistic. But narcissistic or not, nobody was going to call AB out on his BS. And fans and reporters decided to let his actions slide. And to make matters even worse, AB isn't just trying to play football again. He's also recruiting former NFL MVP Cam Newton. On May 28, 2023, Brown reached out to Newton via Twitter, offering him $150,000 to play in Albany's home game on June 16, 2023. In other words, Antonio Brown isn't just trying to play, he's also bribing former NFL players to join him. I mean, think about how messed up that is. This dude just offered Cam Newton 6 figures for one game. And even if you take the entire team combined, their salary only comes out to about $600,000 this year, which is ironic considering Brown hasn't been staying up to date on paying his current players. And even if he does, can you imagine how pissed off the rest of the team would be? It would be the ultimate lose-lose situation. But once again, nobody dared to tell AB that. And still, after everything he's done, the league still pretended to be oblivious. But what makes even less sense is Antonio Brown's recent comment stating he isn't even the team's owner. Put simply, AB is in so much shit that he's not taking any responsibility for his actions. All that to think that a few months ago, Antonio Brown couldn't be happier. He was transitioning from his NFL career to owning an Arena Football League dynasty. Many would call it the best case scenario for someone who burned nearly all of his bridges. I mean, I still remember Antonio Brown's first game as an owner as if it were yesterday. He dressed up in a nice suit with all smiles and signed autographs for kids. It was honestly heartwarming seeing AB out of the public NFL eye and enjoying life. And better yet, it was encouraging that AB acted like a normal human being. For example, when a security guy approached Antonio Brown telling him to leave the field, he didn't overreact. Instead, he calmly told the security guard that he owned the team. And even still, when the security guard didn't believe him, Brown handled it like a pro. He didn't make a big scene about it or get into an altercation. But ever since then, things have gone downhill for the 7-time Pro Bowler. There's been a lot that's transpired since that day, which goes to show just how ironic life can be. When you act selfishly, you end up sad. But when you act selflessly, you often end up happy. Now, this isn't always the case, but it sure seems that way for Antonio Brown. At the beginning of his NFL career, he was just some unknown receiver from Central Michigan, drafted in the 6th round. He had to fight tooth and nail to prove himself to the Steelers. He couldn't afford to put himself first if he wanted to make the team and carve out a role. So at first, Antonio Brown bought into the Steelers' team-first attitude and amassed tons of success. Slowly but surely, he turned into one of the league's best receivers. He was happy, but more importantly, he was selfless. However, the second AB started putting himself first and acting carelessly off the field, his life started getting out of control. All of a sudden, he started beefing with Ben Roethlisberger and forced his way onto a new team. And from there, he continued to put himself first. He'd complain about his helmet, not show up to practices, and start fights with the general manager. It was only a matter of time until no team wanted Antonio Brown, and his life spiraled out of control. But just as his life couldn't get any worse, this is where AB started to change. He purchased the Albany Empire, hoping to impact the community positively and spread joy to football fans. However, once again, he eventually became caught up with his own wants and desires. So now, AB won't even acknowledge that he owns the Albany Empire. He's become so selfish and so sad that he's completely neglected the past 3 months of his life. And as of June 15, 2023, the Albany Empire is no more. They've been kicked out of the National Arena League for failures to pay dues, officially ending this saga. The Empire went from winning 3 championships to extinct in just a few years. And despite getting away with countless poor choices, there came a point when the league couldn't turn the other cheek anymore. If they didn't take action, history would repeat itself again and again and again. That's how selfish Antonio Brown has become. And if that doesn't prove the importance of not putting yourself first, I'm not sure what will. Speaking of which, if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to check out one of my most recent videos and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.